Why we give up so soon? 23% of people quit within the first week. Not the first month, the first year, or even after a reasonable try. The first 7 days. And here's what really keeps me up at night. 92% never make it to the finish line at all. So what happens in those first few days that causes nearly a quarter of us to walk away from the very things we said we wanted? What invisible force is strong enough to overpower our ambitions, our plans, our best intentions? The answer isn't what you think, and understanding it might be the only thing standing between you and everything you've been chasing. Let me tell you what nobody talks about when they hand you advice about goal setting and motivation. There's a war happening inside your brain right now, and one side has been winning for about 95% of human history. Princeton researchers discovered something fascinating when they looked at people making decisions between immediate and delayed rewards. Your brain has two systems fighting for control. One is emotional, primal, and hardwired for survival. The other is logical, forward-thinking, and relatively new in evolutionary terms. When you see that cake sitting on the counter, or when your alarm goes off at 5 in the morning and your bed feels impossibly comfortable, that's not a willpower issue. That's your emotional brain activating areas associated with dopamine, the same regions that light up in people experiencing drug cravings. Your ancestor who grabbed the right berries immediately instead of planning for next week, they survived. The one who waited and strategized, something else got those berries. For over 200,000 years, immediate rewards kept us alive. Agriculture, long-term food storage, planning beyond tomorrow, that's only been around for about 10,000 years. Your brain hasn't caught up. It's still wired to choose now over later, survival over strategy, certain over uncertain. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is the part that changes everything. When researchers at the University of Delaware studied why people abandon their goals, they found something that flips the traditional narrative on its head. It's not that people don't want it enough. It's not that they're lazy or lack discipline. The problem happens in a very specific moment that most people never see coming. Remember those 23% who quit in the first week? They all experience the same psychological phenomenon, and it happens on day 3 or 4. Day 1, you're riding high on what psychologists call the fresh start effect. Your dopamine is pumping. You feel motivated, powerful, capable of anything. Day 2, you're still good. The novelty hasn't worn off completely. But somewhere around day 3 or 4, something shifts. The motivation that felt so real, so permanent, so unshakable, it just vanishes. And here's the crucial part nobody tells you. This was always going to happen. That initial motivation wasn't commitment. It was a neurochemical reaction, and like all reactions, it has a half-life. Most people interpret this as failure. They think, I guess I didn't want it that bad after all. They quit. But successful people, that 8% who actually make it, they understand something fundamental about how change actually works. The dropout doesn't happen because the goal was wrong. It happens because there's a massive gap between what we think goal pursuit looks like and what it actually feels like. We imagine this linear journey from point A to point B, steadily moving forward, feeling motivated the whole way. That's a fantasy. The reality is that you'll feel motivated for maybe 3 days, and then you'll have to do it anyway. That's not a bug in the system. That's the system. A study published in Behavioral Brain Research revealed something that should be taught in every school. When participants were offered financial rewards for completing tasks, they chose their effort-reward combinations based on the money they'd earn. Makes sense, right? But when they actually started the work, something completely different happened. The reward became almost irrelevant. What determined their performance was how much effort the task actually required. People consistently underestimated the difficulty, and when reality hit, most gave up. Think about your last abandoned goal. I bet you didn't quit because you stopped wanting the end result. You quit because the daily reality of getting there was harder than you imagined. The gap between expectation and experience killed your momentum. So if this is universal, if our brains are literally wired against us, how does anyone succeed at anything? Here's what the research reveals, and this is where everything starts to make sense. The 8% who succeed don't have superhuman willpower. They don't want it more than you do. They've just learned to work with their brain instead of against it. and the first thing they do differently happens before they even start. Specific beats vague every single time. I want to be successful means nothing to your brain. It's abstract, unmeasurable, impossible to act on. But I want to lead a department within my company in the next year. That's concrete. Your brain can work with that. Studies show that specific, challenging goals lead to higher performance 90% of the time. Not because they're easier to achieve, but because they're easier to act on. Your brain needs clarity before it commits resources. The second thing successful people do is break their goals into pieces so small they feel almost embarrassingly simple. This isn't about making things easy, it's about understanding how your brain processes achievement. Every small win triggers a dopamine release. That dopamine reinforces the behavior, making it more likely you'll do it again. Successful people aren't better at delayed gratification, they're better at engineering small, immediate rewards along the way. But here's the part that most goal-setting advice completely misses, and this is critical. The people who succeed at long-term goals don't count on motivation. They expect it to disappear. They plan for the day when they don't feel like it anymore, because they know that day is coming. Research from Queen Mary University in London found that when people set goals, they focus on the rewards they'll get. But when it's time to actually do the work, their attention shifts entirely to the effort they're required. The reward fades into the background. The effort becomes the only thing that matters. This is why discipline beats motivation every time. Motivation is a feeling. Feelings change. Discipline is a system. Systems persist. Let me tell you about the 14 slip-ups. Researchers tracking successful goal achievers over 2 years found that even the people who ultimately succeeded experienced an average of 14 setbacks during that time. 14 moments where they failed, where they broke their commitment, where they had to start over. The difference wasn't that they didn't fail. The difference was what happened after the failure. The 92% who quit interpret failure as evidence. See, I knew I couldn't do this. This proves I'm not cut out for it. They spiral into guilt and shame. The 8% interpret failure as data. Okay, that approach didn't work. What did I learn? What can I adjust? Same failure, completely different response.